Hello, everyone, and welcome to another great episode of Generation Talks, where we address various topics to help our current and our prospective students, our alumni, other nonprofit organizations, and our generous partners. I am your host, Kwanzaa, and I'm the recruitment manager for Jacksonville's Regeneration IT program. And yet again, I have another wonderful episode available for you all. Today, I am joined by Nicole Smart with Smart EDI Solutions. So Nicole, please start us off by telling us a little bit about yourself and your company.
Thank you, Kwanzaa. It's a pleasure to be here to speak to all of everyone tuning in. I am the founder and principal consultant of Smart EDI Solutions, where I help business leaders and essentially organizations foster their diversity and inclusion initiatives, regardless of what stage they're in the process. I have 15 plus years in professional sports work experience, in addition to really being an advocate for driving the agenda for and advocacy for underrepresented communities when it comes to race, age, gender, sexual orientation, etc. So very happy to be here today.
Well, I am excited and I'm very thankful that we have your expertise available for this conversation. So audience, just a reminder, if you have any questions, there's something we don't cover, please feel free to leave them in the comments area and we'll get to them before we end. So, okay, Nicole, today we're discussing equity, diversity, and inclusion in the workplace. And of course, this is a very relevant topic with everything taking place today, with the increased awareness and support of the Black Lives Matter movement. So I think a great place for us to start would be, what does a truly equal, diverse, and equitable, inclusive workplace actually look like? Right.
So great question. I just want to start with the terms in itself, because diversity and inclusion essentially has been, the term has been diluted, right? And there's still a number of people that, no shade to anyone, but there's the general consensus among some people where they feel that it's exclusive just to hiring the next woman or person of color, right? Given where we are collectively. However, in light of the unfortunate circumstances of Mr. Floyd, which certainly is not an anomaly when it comes to racial inequality and injustice within this country, the spotlight on the experience more so for Black people within the workplace, is driving, right? So what does the diversity, equity, and inclusion workforce look like, right? So when you think about it, diversity in the workforce refers to an organization that intentionally employs a workforce comprised of individuals of a variety of differences when it comes to intersectionality, when it comes to race, age, gender, sexual orientation, religious status, economic status, orientation, etc. Right? And inclusion is the invisible thread that kind of binds it all together when there are structures and processes in place that's really meant to have workers be treated fairly, feel that they can bring their authentic selves to work, have equal access to opportunities, etc. Equity is where everyone receives a fair treatment in terms of leveling the playing field, right? When it comes to the workplace, and it's one of the driving, one of the initial driving terms of why I use E in my company, where it's Smart EDI Solutions, where everyone's like, well, I've heard of DEI, I've never heard it as EDI, because it's important for everyone, before you can even drill down to the diversity and inclusion dimensions, that everyone, right, emphasize, receives fair treatment in the workplace. So it's, it's a collective, it involves intent, it involves, leaders within the organization visibly and publicly championing diversity, where right now, what we see with the Black Lives Matter movement and the response and the civil unrest, and, leaders and CEOs, presidents making statements about how they support Black Lives Matter, but really talking about how they're going to champion or providing actionable action, in addition to presenting, the statement and putting money out to support various initiatives for advancing Black, Indigenous, people of color within society. So it's a number of varying factors, but I think it's important to really start with what the terms mean when it comes to the equity inclusion, because a lot of people, look at that in various ways, which is, no shade to anyone, once again, but it's important to really understand what that means. And it's such a beautiful thing when you look at it in terms of really embracing and supporting people with their differences, what they bring to the table. For example, when you look at me, you're not able to tell that I'm Trinidadian and I identify as Caribbean Black, not African American, and
Mhm.
you know what institution I went to, and you
Right.
know what my socioeconomic status is. So it's really important to really understand what the term entails, and help help drive that agenda for creating a sustainable change.
Right. I totally grasp all of that, because you can't do the work if you don't know what it is you're actually doing, you know, outlining the
Exactly.
definition of these things and then putting that into play. Love that. And
Right.
especially with the word equity. Yes, we definitely
Yeah.
need clarity around that.
Fairness for everyone. Absolutely.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Now, with generation, our participants have a diverse background,
Mhm.
but are primarily Black, African American, young men and women who oftentimes this is their first time in the workplace. They're starting off in their careers. We are preparing them for entry-level positions. What advice can you give those type of individuals when they are looking for a job so that they can ensure that the company they are seeking employment with actually prioritizes diversity and inclusion?
Yeah, that's a really great question and a really interesting time that we're in right now, where I'm optimistic as far as what will happen moving forward to help drive sustainable change. But you know, the advice I would give young people is that it's an amazing opportunity. Again, leading with those lens of being optimistic. It's an amazing opportunity where you know Generation Z, for example, is focused on aligning their values with an organization's value, right, and what they can bring to the table, as well as everything else that they have to offer in terms of you know advocacy, etc. I will say it's important to be mindful let's start with employers, for example, right? For employers, it's important for them to really understand that there are 5 generations in the workforce, from traditionalists to Generation Z. I identify within Generation X. I'm a 70s baby, right? So if you're hiring for diversity and you know your demographic makeup is made up of people who are working longer, and of different backgrounds, there are obviously a lot of different ways in which they view the world and really drive their decision making based on their backgrounds and experiences and their generation when it comes to technology. For example, when it comes to traditionalists who essentially were impacted by things such as the Great Depression, et cetera, and just see the world in a different way. So it's you know, cultivating a workplace and environment that caters to that. But for the younger people, I would say really do some work in terms of looking at the research that's out there. For example, McKinsey & Company, regardless of whatever industry that you're in, I found that a lot of the research that's out there that supports how diversity helps organizations leverage that competitive advantage and increases innovation and productivity and all the amazing things that it brings to the table, but really look at the research. So for example, let's start with Black women, where the research supports that Black women are the most educated demographic in this country. And however, they're more likely to be unemployed and not be able to quickly drive up the channel of you know, hierarchy when it comes to leadership positions as well. And there's something called the broken rung, you know, where even before, if I remember correctly, the broken rung is where even before you enter the workplace, you're already at a disadvantage. So empower yourselves. And I'm not just saying that because my last name is Smart, but empower yourself by having a growth mindset and really looking at the research so that you can become well informed and you can strategize and you can pivot and figure out, okay, how can I challenge what's out there, these structural systems that are in place, these barriers that are in place that impede me or keep me as a person back before I enter the workforce, and see how you can really strategize and go about advancing even before you even get in the door. So I would recommend, you know, just looking at things like that to get started. And for Black men, you know, it is what it is, where we all are, and I will say this very empathetically, you know, and without, again, not pointing fingers, but it's mindful to be in a place of self-awareness and really understanding what it is, right? When you look at the work environment and how there are certain rules that apply to Black men that don't apply to white men as well, right? So you're held to different standards, and it's not to say that you have to conform But, you know, there's certain rules of engagement. There are certain ways that you can go about empowering yourselves and being in a place of really acknowledging and knowing, you know, what's happening out there when it comes to the expectations, the way that you're viewed within the workplace, and really challenging that. And it does take work, right? But the good news is that we're in a really good place historically. Actually, you know, we're living in a time in history when you look at the pandemic, when you look at the Black Lives Matter movement, and you know 10 years, 20 years, 50 years from now, look back on this and say, wow, you know, look at where this started. When you you know, look at how we're able to advance, because again, I'm leading through the lens of being optimistic, but just really looking at how we were able to advance as a race, and we as the Black community, African Americans, Caribbean Blacks, etc., and essentially Black Indigenous people of color, how we were able to advance within the scope of where we are as a collective and a society. So just really doing the research, acknowledging where we are, and just really utilizing that to our advantage to try to, you know, tackle that and create some sustainable change moving forward.
Now, I definitely want to dabble into or step into where you spoke about the self-awareness for my next question, because I know you don't know me, but depending upon the week, who knows what hairstyle you'll get from me, right? So one of the things at Generation that we do in our programs is that we offer mentors that work with resume writing and also mock interviews, again, preparing our youth or the people that are in our program for employment. So with that self-awareness, with that research that you're telling them to actually do, what would you say to also the same job seekers about the traditional ideas around the appearances that they have, especially when it comes to interviewing for these jobs?
So there's definitely, when you look at it, there's a bias when it comes to professional standards. I know a lot of people don't want to admit it. You know, the approach that I use when I actually facilitate workshops with my clients is that I say that we all have biases, right? It's not just, you know, focused on any particular race or gender. We all have biases, because when you look at it, what shapes our bias and what may distort our way of thinking is the experiences, our backgrounds, all of those primary and secondary dimensions that I mentioned earlier. It shapes the way that we see the world. So, for example, if you have someone who is a part of the hiring team, for example, right, and they have a particular bias, whether it's conscious or unconscious, about women with natural hair. Very early on in my career, while working at Deloitte Touche, for example, you know, and just really going into spaces where I'm being interviewed for a job, I was very mindful of how I wore my hair. Where again, I'm from the Caribbean. We love our plaits, we love our braids, which is beautiful. But you know, for some, and you know, some people may have different opinions on this. It's not necessarily in the professional work environment. Well, when you look at dreadlocks, for example, that's another thing when it comes to grooming. And Black men. Not sure if you're also aware of this. There are Black hair laws that were passed to stop natural hair discrimination, I believe, in California and New York, right? And when I saw that out there, it was just mind blowing. And this was in 2019, I believe. You know, it was just mind blowing to me in the sense of, wow, we need laws to protect the way that we wear our hair. But it's something that I can attest to very early on in my career in the early 90s, where I was mindful of that, where if I'm going in for a job interview into any powerhouse, any organization, that I didn't feel that, that I personally didn't feel, based on my experience within other places in the workplace, would be embraced. It really challenged the way that I, you know, scheduled here appointments and how I move forward, which is something that's a real thing. And I think a lot of people struggle with that right now, as we've seen with I believe TV broadcasters as well, who are wearing their hair natural, and then, you know, there's some contract issues with that as well. So it's a real thing to be mindful of. But again, it's really amazing, and that's why I love my state, New York, where, you know, there are laws that are enacted to really combat any kind of race-based hair discrimination. But it's really a real thing, and it's something to be mindful of. And until we can collectively, as a human race, as a society, as an American, culture and really break down the walls of these structural barriers that are in place and really change the mindset and the way that people see, for example, Black people within the workplace, and how this is just a part and representation of our culture and identity and has nothing to do with whatever it is that you're thinking that would not be accepted within the professional standards of work.
Right. Yeah, the fact, like you said, the fact that they had to put a law in place to protect it was just mind-boggling. And I know a lot of people were like, what? Didn't know. Exactly. But also, speaking to what you were saying regarding the mindsets and the bias, is there something that we can do to help those people who are actually in the position of recruiting, as a recruiter within the company, to change those mindsets and those bias that they have?
So bias, again, it's something that we all have, right? Because what drives the way that we see the world, what may potentially distort our decision making, is the fact that we all come from different walks of life, whether it's socioeconomic, whether it's our educational background, work experiences, adversity that we've suffered in life, whatever that is, it shapes the way that we see the world and make decisions when it comes to having, as defined with bias, prejudice in favor or against one thing, which in terms can come across as being unfair within the context of hiring for diversity, right? So I would say, for me personally, I drive the tool and resource of really empowering, having leaders or hiring managers or whoever is involved in that recruitment process to really understand what bias is and that we all have them, so that they can be, or essentially to just raise their level of consciousness in terms of that, because there've been some amazing moments where people are like, wow, I didn't realize that that's the way I was thinking, which is why you would see a lot of what's called unconscious bias as well, right? Exactly. And a lot of what falls into that is an affinity bias, for example, where we're more likely to choose someone that we identify with, or someone that represents our younger selves, or someone that we can see, having drinks after work because they're more like you or whatever. It's very easy from just a human element perspective. Yeah. When you look at underrepresented groups, when you look at whoever is involved in the hiring process, that's where it gets a little sticky, and that's where it gets a little challenging. So I would encourage, just having within organizations, and I would encourage employers to really have these unconscious bias workshops that I do as well, to create that self-awareness, to really look at how these things fit into the institutionalized racism and the structural barriers that keeps people back. Because if you're not aware of it, then the cycle continues for people, Black, Indigenous, people of color, and all underrepresented and communities and marginalized groups to not really advance because of something as simple as an affinity bias.
Okay. All right. Now, even as a company as a whole, and you already touched on workshops, so I'm going to ask you to go a little further into that. The company as a whole, what can they do to change or enhance their company's culture in order to make sure that they are promoting diversity and inclusion? How would they start if they're not already doing so?
Right. So it starts from the top. Leadership has to be visible champions. They have to publicly, advocate for diversity, whether it's internally or externally, and be transparent about, where they are, what they haven't done, what they'd like to do, but they need to be able to articulate that in a very thoughtful, intent, purposeful, meaningful way, and also be done in a way where it's tangible. For example, having action-oriented, items in place, or that you're aiming for that. But there's nothing wrong, because what the workplace or what the social construct has taught us is that we're not allowed to be vulnerable in the workplace, right? There are certain standards there where we're supposed to just come in, you're the VP of X, you're the manager of X, you're the assistant of X, and then you walk in and it's just that title. But we really need to break down the structures in terms of really embracing the fact that when people come into the workplace, they're human beings. And I think when you start with that, then you're able to lead and drive diversity and inclusion, again, visibly championing it, visibly talking about maybe where you you found that there are shortcomings and where you would like for your organization to advance. And you'd be amazed at how that's received from a lot of people when you're able to be transparent and be able, from a psychological perspective, you know, have people really tie in or buy into what you're saying, and then really doing the work, you know, putting the budget behind what happens moving forward, making sure that whoever is in support with driving your initiatives have the compensation that they need, and being a proactive voice for facilitating change. That's really important. It really starts from the top. Yeah. Even though this part, diversity and inclusion, I encourage it be a collective of everyone involved, from, you know, employee engagement surveys, and just really giving people that voice within the organization to really say anonymously what they need within the workplace, right, to help drive strategic planning and execution. But it really starts from the top, and it has to translate in a way that you're being intent and purposeful and ready to take action moving forward.
I love that you said also the part that sticks out to me and probably a lot of other people is to put the money behind it, because there's one thing to say it, you know, one thing to type it and make it look good on a meme or what have you, but to actually put the action behind it and put your money where your mouth is, so to speak, to really make sure that we're doing the intentional work.
Absolutely. That's the key part. You know, it's not hard work. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach, because when you think about it, you know, 400 years of inequality in terms of race within this country, and really changing behavior and mindset, which is something that's not easy. There isn't a one-size-fits-all approach, but when you put the intent and the purpose behind it, it will help make it a little easier to drive some sustainable change moving forward.
Well, I definitely know that people are listening. So, Nicole, that actually brings us down to the end of everything. But before we go, before we go, I want to know, can you drop any final gems upon us? Any last remarks you want to make? I want to give you the space for that. And then also one more thing, because I already know we're going to have a lot of people asking, how can people get in contact with you directly? And I want to know too.
Okay. So first, you can find me on Facebook, not very active on social media, but Facebook, Smart EDI Solutions, Instagram, Smart EDI Solutions, as well as LinkedIn, Smart EDI Solutions, right? So and my website, Smart EDI Solutions, and it has my cell phone and my business email to contact me, right? But one gem I really want to drive for the new generation coming in, for the younger people who are now getting into the workplace. Be mindful of how you define success. Success is not just about making money, right? And seeing that this generation, and with a lot of people, not necessarily specific to Generation Z, but everyone's very big on aligning their personal values. It's something that I hold very dear to myself as well, with the organization's core value, as well as how they move forward. So certainly really take a look within and really understand that, you know, in 2020 and as you move forward, leading with the mindset, yes, we money and air is right up with the same. We can't do one without the other, right? We need money and air to survive. But you know, the way that we've been taught that society entails having a great job, money, fancy house, fancy car, all of that, it's been redefined. So redefine the way that you think about success when it comes to work-life balance, when it comes to really going after your dreams, and you know, really filling within what you feel your purpose is and what you feel that you can contribute to society. It's just really an amazing thing. And Oprah talks about this as well. She's been successful in what she does because she was able to tie into her purpose at a very young age, and that's what helped to drive her success. And you know, you find that little piece of advice very useful.
I love that. And I tell my oldest son that also, you can't compromise money for your health, because if you're dead, you can't spend it. You can't compromise your values for money, because if you don't feel good, like there's so many things that come with that. So that was a big gem. Thank you. For that.
You know, I wanted to end on that because I feel it's a really important piece that the younger generation needs to be mindful of. So.
Absolutely. Well, Nicole, like I already said in the beginning, totally excited. Thank you for lending us your expertise on this conversation. I know this topic can go on much longer because it's much broader, but thank you for everything that you've given us thus far. And I know people will be reaching out to you for more information.
Yeah, happy to be here. It's all a part of my altruistic efforts, so I'm happy to lend a voice to the topic.
Thank you.
All right.
Well, everyone else, that's all the time we have for the day. If you're joining us on the replay and you have any questions, definitely still leave them in the comments area. We'll be following up and checking that particular area. But until the next time, until the next episode, everyone still be kind and please be safe. You all have a good one. Bye-bye.